Medical science has more to do with money and power than science. If we want to improve public health, we need to stop the corruption in our medical system. In this video you will learn about the corruption going on in the medical industry. And you will also learn 4 ways they use science to sell their treatments. And finally you will learn what we can do about it. Many regard scientific studies as the ultimate way to learn about diseases and how to treat them. But money and power control our medical system more than science. The core foundation of our Western medicine started because of greed and power. The man responsible for that was John D. Rockefeller. He was an oil billionaire that wanted to find other ways to make money. He found out that he could use his oil to create medical drugs. So his task was to replace alternative medicine with allopathic medicine. So he hired a man called Abraham Flexner. Abraham Flexner went to different medical schools and observed what they did. And in 1910 he released his report. Flexner wanted the schools to have high admission and graduation standards. So he gave this report to the Congress and they accepted his proposal. And then Rockefeller and Carnegie gave grants to the schools if they taught allopathic medicine. And they had to have people on their board. Money was not the only reason why Rockefeller wanted to control medicine. Rockefeller was a big supporter of eugenics or population control. That's why he founded the organization American Birth Control League. It's now called Planned Parenthood. Bill Gates Sr. was once the leader of this organization. And his son was Bill Gates, the computer guy that created Microsoft. Bill Gates has no medical degree and is not a doctor, but because of his power and influence, he runs the World Health Organization, another organization created by the Rockefeller and the Rothschilds. Like Rockefeller, Bill created his foundation to avoid taxes and influence society. He uses his organization to gain power and wealth, and to extend his software empire into global health, development and education. His foundation has part in almost any area of global health. Its biggest purpose is to reduce the population through vaccines. That's why Bill Gates is creating the COVID-19 vaccine. The organization that should regulate drug makers is the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA should have the public's best interest when it comes to health, but the organization is in bed with the big pharma cartel. The FDA doesn't do any clinical studies of any drug. That's the task of drug companies and other institutions. Drug companies need to get their drugs accepted by the FDA before they can sell it. In the 1970s, the responsibility of the FDA increased, and in 1979, the average approval time for each drug was 45 months. The big pharma cartel didn't like to wait several years before they got their drugs accepted. They used lobbying to create the Prescription User Fee Act in 1992. It allowed the FDA to collect fees from drug companies. Now, regular applications for drugs take 12 months or 6 months for priority cases. This act means that the FDA receives money directly from drug companies. Before that, the United States Treasury funded the FDA, but now they receive most of their money from Big Pharma. In 2017, Big Pharma paid 75% of the agency's review budgets. Drug companies are known to use lobbying to influence politicians. The medical industry spends more money on lobbying than any other industry. Another result of that lobbying was the 1997 Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act. It made the FDA more lenient when they accepted drugs. Big Pharma and wealthy people also use science to manipulate the health industry. They do it in 4 ways. Either they manipulate studies, ignore it, stop it, or make it up. So let's learn how these 4 strategies work. The first strategy they do is to manipulate studies. The medical industry is known to use ghostwriters. So a ghostwriter is a person, for example a PhD, that writes a fake study. That person then hypes the benefits of the drug and hides the adverse side effects. So when he's finished with his report, he gives it to the drug company. Then they find a prominent doctor or scientist and put their name on the study, then publish it in some respected journal. Drug makers use the term medical writers to disguise ghostwriters. Ghostwriters can earn up to $20,000 per report and often get to travel and get other expenses paid by the drug company. And the prominent doctor gets his name in a respected journal without lifting a finger. Doctors rely on peer-reviewed medical journals to learn about prescription drugs. But thanks to medical ghostwriting, you can't trust any scientific journal anymore. Up to a third of academic professors have personal or financial ties to drug makers. Even government institutions are guilty too. Another problem is industry-sponsored studies. Many producers of animal products use this strategy to paint their product in a better light. They often give some scientists money to make a short study and hide the negative aspects of animal products. A second strategy that drug companies use to manipulate science is to ignore it. For example, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the world. A plant-based diet is the only thing shown to reverse heart disease. Dean Ornish and Esselstyn have already revealed this in their studies. But doctors still use blood thinners and cholesterol-lowering drugs to treat heart patients when they could have taught everyone to eat a plant-based diet and reverse their condition naturally. Drug companies and everyone in the medical industry make more money by treating sick people, not healing them. Therefore, they must ignore any science that points to how to reverse any disease, and instead make everyone use pharmaceutical drugs. So if the FDA followed ethical scientific practices, then a majority of drugs would never hit the market. One example is chemotherapy. One study showed that it was only 2.3% effective. Despite that, we still use chemotherapy to treat cancer patients. But Big Pharma wants us to use it to earn more money, even if it doesn't work. A third way Big Pharma manipulates science is to make it up. There are 3 ways Big Pharma make up science, such as the germ theory that our genes cause diseases and mental illnesses. One lie Big Pharma repeats is that our genes cause our diseases. They want us to ignore that stress, diets, and other bad habits are behind our illnesses. Instead, they want us to feel like victims by believing that our inheritance is the reason why we are sick, not our habits. Another lie that they teach us is that germs cause diseases. Pharmaceutical companies endorse the germ theory. They want us to believe that outside forces like bacteria and viruses make us ill. So many people believe that Louis Pasteur's germ theory was scientifically proven. But he deceived the public, including his fellow scientists. Despite that, Louis Pasteur became a hero of modern medicine. Robert Koch was a German scientist born in the 19th century. Dr. Koch said that he provided the necessary proof that germs cause diseases. For him to test his theory, he developed 4 postulates that we still use today. The first postulate states that the pathogens need to be present in every case of the illness. After that, you have to be able to isolate the microorganism from the sick person and put it in a pure culture without any contamination. And then you should be able to reproduce the illness in another host. And from that person, you should also be able to recover the pathogen. So we can agree that these postulates seem reasonable. But the problem with the people that believed in the germ theory was that they couldn't blame bacteria for every illness, because they discovered that not every bacteria was present in sick people, or they were present in healthy people that didn't have the disease. Therefore, they invented the term virus, which means poison or harmful substance in Latin. They wanted to blame viruses for our illnesses. But the problem is that no scientists have ever isolated a pure virus. So if we can't prove that they exist, then our diseases cannot be because of a virus. If you want to learn more about this, then please read the book Virus Mania. It got recently updated to include information about COVID-19. If we can't isolate a virus, then how can we create a vaccine for something that doesn't exist? The big pharma cartel uses germs such as viruses to create medicines and vaccines. One great example is the COVID-19 virus. The only place where COVID-19 exists is in the media. If you want to get rid of COVID-19, then you should throw away your TV or stop reading the news. Another way Big Pharma makes up diseases is with mental health. We're told that mental disorders are chemical imbalances in the brain. This theory began in the tuberculosis ward in New York. The drug they used for this illness didn't work, but they discovered that some people became euphoric and happy because of the drug. So they believed that there was some chemical imbalance in the brain. Then they said that a lack of serotonin made people depressed or anxious. But they never proved the theory. When they diagnose a mental illness, they have no brain scan or blood test. With physical diseases such as cancer, diabetes or heart disease, we have physical markers that we can use. There are blood tests or brain scans or other things you can do to check if you have these diseases. But with mental illnesses, there are no such tests you can do. Psychotherapists just create a name of a mental disease and then generate a list of symptoms and then diagnose it. And then they give everyone a drug. I'm not saying that our depression or anxiety don't exist. What I'm objecting to is that a chemical imbalance in the brain is the cause. Almost every US general practitioner use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The DSM has a mental illness for every condition possible. Everyone can get a diagnosis. At one time they even discussed adding internet gaming disorder as a mental illness. To diagnose depression, you have to show at least 5 out of 9 symptoms every day. Before, you have to show these symptoms for 6 months before you got a diagnosis. But then they cut it down to 3 months, then 1 month, and now it's only 2 weeks. Drug companies, psychotherapists, the FDA and other federal agencies work together. 69% of DSM-5 task force members had financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Drug companies also give money to the National Institute of Mental Health, and APA. Mental health is a huge industry created by drug companies. Psychotropic drugs are so toxic that patients drop out before the experiment can last 4 to 6 weeks. That's why we don't have any long-term studies of them. The symptoms of psychotropic drugs can range from mild to severe. In severe cases, it can cause increased suicide or violent behavior. The many school shooters are often on some psychotropic drug or have severe withdrawal effects. The final way Big Pharma uses science to sell their drugs is by stopping good science. That's why they try to prevent breakthrough discoveries from happening that could stop their profits. One industry that uses this strategy is the biotech industry. They create GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. No one monitors the impact of GMO foods. There's no good human GMO feeding study. So that's why we can't know if it's causing our illnesses. The country most supportive of GMO foods and the first to approve them was the United States. According to US law, GMO ingredients are considered food additives. So normally, additives must undergo extensive safety studies. So if approved, the label of food products containing the additive must list it as an ingredient. But there's one exception if the product gets deemed generally recognized as safe or GRAS. To get this stamp, you have to go through peer-reviewed published studies, or there needs to be a consensus among the scientific community that the product is safe. But somehow, if they declare GMOs as GRAS, even if they haven't made any peer-reviewed studies. So that means that the FDA does not regulate GMO foods. Instead, it's the responsibility of biotech companies. So what's crazy is that you can patent GMOs. but you are not allowed to patent living things such as vegetables and fruits. But with GMOs it's possible. If GMOs are the same thing as ordinary vegetables or fruits, then how can you get a patent for them? That must mean that they changed something. Biotech companies are known to prevent any scientists to expose the industry. One prime example is Dr. Putzai. He was a well-known scientist that got a 1.6 million British pounds from the UK government. He got the grant to design a rigorous safety assessment protocol for testing GMOs. For 2 years he reviewed several confidential industry GMO studies. So what he found shocked him, and he told everyone that GMOs were unsafe. He became a hero in his institute. But then 2 phone calls from the UK Prime Minister's office changed everything. So the next day he got fired after 35 years of service. And his entire research team got dissolved. And they stopped using his protocol. And he also got legal threats if he tried to expose everything. If we want to create a great medical system, we have to let real science prevail without financial influence. So therefore, scientific journals must have strict guidelines to forbid ghostwriters. So if anyone get caught, then they should be banned, and everyone involved. The FDA should also become an independent organization with no financial ties to Big Pharma. The organization should also make its own clinical trials of drugs and have rigorous approval standards, and also test natural remedies. And hospitals and drug companies should also become non-profit organizations. That will prevent them to have an incentive to make more money all the time. And drug companies shouldn't be able to use patents to raise drug prices. Hospitals should also teach patients more about prevention such as nutrition. We should also use more cognitive therapies with people with mental problems and not use psychotropic drugs. If you like this video, then press the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also visit our website cancerwisdom.net to learn other ways you can treat cancer with natural remedies without using toxic treatments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.